even more sun. I started watching Chernobyl. Oh my gosh. Okay, well, sorry. Wait. I started watching Chernobyl, and I don't know what inspired me to. I think I Googled it. I Googled it to know when it happened. I was 3 months old. 3 months old when it happened. And I don't remember anything. I was 3 months. But I know now that I was like given iodine or whatever measures. Anyways, but I found this New Yorker article that speaks how fictional this show is. Now, to anyone who's not familiar, who's been under a rock and hasn't seen any shows, especially American shows, it would come as a surprise or like, what? That's not true. This show, fiction? It's not a documentary, and fiction documentaries are not documentaries. It's kind of like Queen, Bohemian Rhapsody, the Queen movie. It was like embodying the feeling and the message behind it and condensing it. That was the purpose of that, and I think this is the purpose of this. It is kind of, I see the point of the writer where it is damaging because it spreads a lie that might be more consequential than taking the time to have like a more accurate description that will take time, and it would be boring because it kind of dismisses. One of the things that got me in the article was how this show did not show how it wasn't one person, and it wasn't threats of being shot or any punishment that scared people into not doing the right thing. It was years or like, this propaganda or whatever, this cultivation of culture over time that led to people cutting corners, and forget exactly what else she was saying. Actually, I should bring it up and actually like talk about it directly, because it's such an awesome article. Also, I'm kind of very fascinated, and when I was younger, Hiroshima, I was fascinated by that, but I'm fascinated about this invisible killer. I mean, you can't freaking see it, and it kills you. And in one of the accounts of, there we go, there's the article of, so there's this book that has accounts of people from then, and one of them, like, she lived fine because her baby absorbed all of the radiation. And to me, I don't understand how that makes sense. Technically, you're the first point of contact with the radiation. So how does that make sense? And the baby died 4 hours after birth, and she's fine. Like, that just blows my mind. You would think the opposite. You would think that the baby would be unaffected because it's protected. That was just really cool to learn. I mean, really cool in a morbid way, but so one of the things in this, okay, so you have the punishment. Confrontation wasn't a thing, and that is something I've heard about sort of in Romania under communist rule. It's not communist, it's just under the rule of a government, a culture where you don't question authority. You're not going to have these speeches that they're talking about that I haven't seen yet. But that's so American. That, I mean, anyone, unfortunately, Americans don't realize that's not how it works. And Americans are so used to, I should say, white Americans are so used to being okay with confrontation. Like, you can confront anyone, you can confront a cop, right? And I know my past relationship, we got into a cop situation, and I remember he sort of alluded at my white privilege that I was confronting the cop. I was not confronting the cop, okay? I was not confronting the cop. But at the same time, I was very aware of my white privilege. I was very aware that I was relatively safe. And that's why I did it. And I mean, why not stand up for someone if you have the power to stand up for someone? Anyways, but gosh, stop ads. But yeah, the confrontation. I love this. Resignation was the defining condition of Soviet life, but resignation is a depressing and untelegenic spectacle. So the creators of Chernobyl imagined confrontation where confrontation was unthinkable. I love that because that's something that is, again, like, it can be so damaging. It's great to feel that you have the power to confront, but it's also very important to understand that you don't always have that power. I don't feel like I have the power of confrontation. I have done that, but imagine if I felt entitled and empowered to do that. It would be much more than I've done. Yeah, I love this part too. The aparachik, I don't know how to pronounce this, but he apparently is like, yeah, I worked in a shoe factory and now I'm in charge. He toasts in what appears to be in the middle of the day to the workers of the world. And the writer of this article is like, no carafe of vodka in the workplace in front of a hostile stranger, and no boasting I'm in charge. And to me, I'm like, yeah, you'd think that people in charge would boast and would have that attitude because that's what they have here. So that was like fascinating on another level. And this character, Komyuk, or I don't know, again, this scientist that was made up of multiple characters. And this, to me, was why I pressed record because over this whole article, there's a lot of it. The seed of it is basically, this one person that is a truth seeker that interviews dozens of people, some of them dying from radiation exposure, digs up a scientific paper that has been censored and figures out exactly what happened minute by minute. She also gets herself arrested and then immediately seated at a meeting on the disaster led by Gorbachev. None of this is possible. And then before that, also, there was some more. Yeah, she comes in and she's grasping it terribly fast. Unlike the dense men at the actual scene of the disaster who seem to need hours to take it in. And this is awesome. And I wish that there would, this is like, okay, well, this is, Hollywood. But this makes it seem like, why is this not being told? Why is this not important? This obviously was a show about the disaster itself, and the corruption or the government. However, this is, if you were going to make it about the government system, this is the thing. The Soviet system of propaganda and censorship existed not so much for the purpose of spreading a particular message as for the purpose of making learning impossible. Let that sink in. This is not about criticizing the Soviet Union or Russia or anything. this, what I like, this is not my purpose of saying this, because it has not, I mean, the Soviet Union kind of doesn't exist anymore. To me, I'm like, I think of Russia as being the same thing, but not really. I don't know, whatever. That's not the point. And it's not the point that there's governments out there that do this, and propaganda and censorship and control and manipulation of the population, etc. But let this sink in, because so many people take advantage of having the possibility to learn and don't do that. And they spread conspiracy theories and all this stuff, just so pointless, when they are able and they have resources to learn. You know, you don't have to go to school to learn. You have YouTube. I spend on YouTube. I feel like learning something. For example, this. Okay, I'll read this article. I never read articles. I should. But I read this article and then I watch a bunch of different YouTubes. But I watch a bunch of different YouTubes today. I was trying to figure out, why is Jay-Z considered the greatest rapper? And I kind of understood by the end of it, it's not for his rapping. Because I was like confused. I'm like, his rapping is not that great. What I mean, am I missing something? Maybe I'm missing something, because I'm not, a black guy, and I've not been even brought up. I've been half brought up in the U.S., but definitely not in those types of situations that he's talking about. So I'm like, what? Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe it's I don't know, but he's not telling it greatly. I lose interest. I don't even know what he's talking like. In a way, you should be able to understand even if you've not had those experiences. That's what I'm trying to get at. Doesn't matter. But I looked at different points of views and like dozens of videos to get a sense, as well-rounded of an opinion as possible. So you can do that even in the U.S. In the U.S., you are able to do that. Information is not as censored once you get out there. It's not as censored. Everyone, every government, any group, any family, anything, any group of people, like racial situations, like they all have their own mission and propaganda and all that stuff, and censorship of stuff, manipulation of information. But in the US, you are able to get past that. There's so many different sources out there. So listen and hear. This was like the biggest thing. This is why I really wanted to record this and talk about it. I'll read it again. I won't even read it about like the system and the government. Propaganda and censorship existed not so much for the purpose of spreading a particular message as for the purpose of making learning impossible. So this system, doesn't matter who it is. I'll say something else. We've learned this in history. Churches did not want, governments in medieval times, etc., did not want the common population to be able to read, to learn to read. Actually, yeah, because they would challenge authority. Because they would be able to, the information didn't come from one controlled source anymore. Everyone had the right to interpret things in their hands. So the best way to control a population is by limiting learning, for them to feel like they're getting enough information, they don't need to learn, or to make it impossible to even access that information. So this is awesome. And she was saying, I think it's a she, the writer of the book is a she, I think. Oh my god, I don't even know. Anyways, this writer was saying, this is why that scientist being such a crazy heroic fiction is problematic, because no one was able to learn that much and to be that fast-witted, because it was the system itself just didn't allow that. And that's probably hard to grasp, because you think, well, intelligence is kind of sometimes regarded as independent of outside factors, and I kind of agree, but knowledge is not. So you can be as intelligent as you want, but critical thinking is learned. Critical thinking is a practice. It's a habit. It's something created and, or at least like polished. You may have the ability or may not have the ability. Maybe that's something we're born with or not, but you don't do it. You kind of don't do it if you don't, at least you can't do it if you don't have the tools, you know, even if you're like really like thinking. I don't know, that was like really interesting. Yeah, it's cheaper. That's like, oh, as a Romanian, you know that. Like, why were the things not made correctly? Because it's cheaper. The end. Um, and that's like, people tell themselves they're doing a good thing. It doesn't come from the top. I think that's like another thing that I wanted to touch on is it's portrayed that this one person. Oh, that's actually the next thing. Anatoly Dyatlov. I don't know, but he's the villain. He's the boss that, you know, strong arms younger, better men into action that will ultimately lead to catastrophe. um all because he wants a promotion. And this writer's like, it wasn't the carrot of a single promotion or even several promotions. It wasn't one nasty or abusive boss. It was the system, made up of primarily pliant men and women, that cut its own corners, ignored its own precautions, and ultimately blew up its own nuclear reactors for no good reason except that this was how things were done. I mean, you hear that in workplace all the time. Well, this is how we've always done things, or this is how we just do the things we take for granted. Think of like Chernobyl. You know, thank goodness you don't work in that. If you do, how are you watching this? Please contact me if you're like a scientist and stuff. That would be awesome. Or anyone, you know. Not necessarily. Are there all scientists working in power plants, in nuclear power plants? I don't know. It would be harder to show a system digging its own grave instead of an ambitious evil man causing the disaster. It's in the same way it's harder to see dozens of scientists looking for clues when you can just create a single fantasy character who will have all the good disaster fighting traits. This is the great man and one woman narrative of history, where it's a few steps and few decisions made by a few men that matter, rather than the mess that humans make and from which they suffer. It's awesome. This is at the end of the article, the second to last, or I don't know, fourth to last paragraph. Just beautiful. Just beautiful. This paragraph is just beautiful. Because I was talking, I just blogged about, I have my blog over hotchoco2.tumblr.com, CHOCO, and the number 2. But yeah, I just blogged about this, like, caring, but it was basically like individualistic society, and we think that we can do it all, and we think that one person does it all, good or bad, that one person is the reason something bad happened or something good happened, or a few people. And this, I mean, this whole thing with the one woman or one man, doesn't matter, one person figuring things out and having the answers and all that stuff. When this writer says there are like so many scientists trying to find clues and figure out what happened and all this stuff, it's a discredit to humanity, and it's a very hurtful narrative. It's a lie that affects how we deal with things, and it affects our future, because if we don't understand that we all have to work together and not one person, I mean, we look at Beyonce, right? We look at her as, oh my God, she is the queen, right? It's not all the people. She freaking could not do it alone. She could not do her own hair and makeup and skincare and um like literally do it, right? As a chemist. And clothes, she could not sew her own clothes all the time. And make her own dances and write her own songs, like every single note, it discredits the work of, it's not just one person, but we have this narrative that constantly is in this society in the US, and I think in modern society that is spreading to other countries as well, the individualistic society. And it's so damaging. It is very damaging to our health. It started off, my blog started off regarding adrenal fatigue, or I'm characterized apparently as crashed. And it's very much like stress. And to me, it's like, it doesn't really matter what it is, but it started because the book started, adrenal reset diet started how people before tuberculosis was discovered to be a virus or bacteria. I don't know which one. I think it's a virus, right? Before that, people would say, oh, it's poor hygiene, it's poor diet, actually, not hygiene, poor diet, poor hygiene. You're not getting out of the house enough, you're not eating right enough, you are too lazy. Shame on you for getting tuberculosis. Shame on you for being sick. Shame on you for dying. And again, it's not overnight that this narrative of individualism has flourished. And that's why we don't realize the damage that it has on society, on individuals, ironically. Our stress, why we're like, back in the day, we were in this stress, we didn't think this much. Just don't think this much, or you don't really have stress, it's all in your head. Well, yeah, it's in our heads and it's in our hearts, it's in our souls, it's in our body, it's everywhere, because it's this disconnection and this lack of pack, and this lack of this very important and vital part of being human that we are forcing ourselves to not have. It's like, how would you deny yourself water? How would you deny yourself, and people do, by drinking only juice, never water, coffee, juice, wine, tea, whatever. Even tea is kind of water, but everything else, is questionable water. How could you deny yourself food? Some people fast, but not forever, because you literally die if you don't eat anything forever. How would you deny these needs? Like, how has family and packs, because packs can be family, but they can be friends, whatever type of community. How can you deny that's so vital? And why do we deny that of ourselves and of others? When someone's sick, oh, they're just lazy. When someone's like depressed, oh, they're just lazy. Oh, you just need to get on some pills. Oh, you just need to be happy. It's all in your head. Or okay, that's real, but it's on you to figure that out. It's on you to do, to fix yourself. It's your fault. Be ashamed, first of all. You let yourself go. You let yourself get to that place. Yeah, and I think people say that because that's what they've learned. That's what they've been told by parents, especially guys. And again, it hasn't come up overnight. I really believe it's been just years and years in making, decades in making. Little by little, it starts with a great idea. It starts with an amazing intention. Because when I say individualism, the opposite of that is not homogeneous blend, like just nothing is different. That's not the opposite of individualism. Individualism is kind of like feminism. Be careful on how you define it. Because individualism is when only you matter and you are priority number one. and it gets to an extreme where you don't care about others, you're not there for others, you think you're better. You think, well, they fell, they have to help themselves up. That's the extreme. But the opposite of that I talk about, that I am very, obviously very passionate about, is like a body. We have different cells that hair looks different than skin, and technically it's the same cell. Or it's, hair is like dead skin, probably not, I don't know, whatever. But it looks very different, right? And even like skin, I have all these different things going on. Anyways, my skin is so bad. But an eyelash, you're not going to tell an eyelash to look exactly like skin, or the opposite. It's just, but it's still together, blended together, together. And I think people are getting that confused. Just because it has a different function doesn't mean that it's an independent island. It doesn't mean that it has to work with you. You have to work with it too. It's not about egos and stuff. So anyways, I got so excited about this article, and I'm excited about watching the show anyways. I love this last thing. Every lie we tell incurs a debt to the truth. That's a pretty cool line, right? Where I once would fear the cost of truth, I only ask, what is the cost of lies? That's like just from a personal note. People who I've had in my life who feared the cost of truth. And I'm like, why do you want to lie or be discreet? There's like, what the heck? And so to me, when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, that's like so applicable to that. Like, what do you fear? The truth. The truth will set you free. Why do you fear the truth so much? What is it? And like, do you realize that like, you should be equally afraid of lies, at least. Anyway, so yeah, I'm sorry I got so excited, and I'm not sorry. That was like awesome, and I hope this reaches out enough out there. I'm sorry I look like crap. That is what I'm sorry about. I shouldn't have put makeup on and did this like really properly, but I was so excited I couldn't help myself, and I really enjoy how I've spoken about this. I feel like, excuse me, in a time when I feel that I can't find my words and my brain is foggy and I can't function, I was pretty coherent, I guess, now. So I don't regret it. But, don't look in my face if this disgusts you, I guess. I don't know. It disgusts me. I can't look at it. Just being real. I mean, I don't do the whole, oh my gosh, I love myself. I'm like flawless. Please. I'm real. All right, cool. I'll talk to you later. Bye.